Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. It's time for another interview, and this is one I feel is very important. I'm conscious of the fact that many of my viewers are in fact young people, including teenagers, who are in a situation where they are at home, their parents are believing Jehovah's Witnesses, and they are making it almost impossible for the individual to conscientiously leave a religion that they're being raised in or forced into. Today's guest has first-hand knowledge of this experience, having been through it very recently themselves. Moss, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the channel.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. It's really cool.
I wish it were under slightly better circumstances, because I understand you've been through the wars. And when I say recently, we're talking as recently as January. So
a month ago.
Yeah. So what's been happening?
So I've been living with also former Jehovah's Witnesses who I knew. They were in my congregation a while ago. And me and my brothers would come over to their house and play games and do stuff, and we really liked them. And
friends of the family.
Yeah. So when I found out that they weren't witnesses anymore through my parents, I messaged one of them on Instagram, like just asking about life and stuff. And they said if I ever needed a place to live, then they had a room. So I'm with them right now.
That's really generous of them. I'm sure that they were surprised, or were they surprised to hear from you? Because presumably, okay.
Yeah, they told me that when they got the message from me that they were like jumping up and down happy that, I was out. Well, mentally out.
Indeed. So if you can possibly walk us back to how you were raised as a witness and at what point your doubts began. Am I to assume you're baptized?
I am, actually. I got baptized at 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised in it. My dad was not. He got baptized at 16 because his friend next door was a witness. And my mom was raised in it. Her whole family's in it. My dad is the only one in his family who's in it. My grandma was studying before she died, but she died. So I have two brothers who were also raised in it. We moved a lot as a kid. Just my dad was getting different jobs. We weren't military or anything, but everyone always asked because we moved so much. And
presumably moving a lot required getting used to different congregations, did it?
So I've lived in Hawaii on the West Coast and on the East Coast. So I never really had a lot of friends because we moved every year or so. So like just when we were getting comfortable in a congregation, we would leave. So my brothers were like my best friends because we were pretty much the only people that we had. And so it was around, I think, I've always really liked science. Like even when I was a little kid, I loved reading about animals, and I was fascinated by the weather, and I would collect rocks, and I really liked learning about how the world worked and natural processes and stuff like that. So I think it was middle school I was a teacher's aide in 7th grade for the 8th grade science teacher. And I guess that was my first, I would watch documentaries, but I would kind of like plug my ears and go blah, blah, blah when they started talking about evolution and stuff. But
we know better than the scientists. What do they know?
Yeah. So when I was in that classroom, I would watch her give lessons about evolution and stuff. And I guess that's when I first started thinking like, oh, there's actual reasons that kind of make sense. And it's not all garbage. And I kind of shoved that thought away because I'm like, all the other reasons, it's fine. So even if it's convincing, it must not be true. But it's always been lingering, like oh, this is pretty possible, at least in my mind, but it can't be true because the Bible's right, so it must be wrong. So I think around 12 is when I first started getting doubts, like right after I was baptized, like 6 months later. And then in 8th grade and high school, they just kept mounting, like little things. And it was mostly scientific stuff that bothered me. Like I would watch brothers give talks and I'm like, well, that's not true. That's not true. And my mom would notice that on the car ride home, I'd be like, well, he said this, this, and this, and these are objectively not true. And she's like, they're not scientists, they're imperfect men, so they make mistakes. But it was like literally every talk, I'm like, that isn't true. So it wasn't one big thing at first. It was just going to the meeting and adding one thing every talk. And then like when I was in 10th and 11th grade, like 16, 17, it was more social issues that I started disagreeing with, like the moral imperatives in the Bible, like homosexuality and subjugation of women and stuff like that.
Presumably, when you are in a school environment and you're surrounded by fellow students from varying backgrounds, including those who either have gay or lesbian parents or who are themselves gay or lesbian, it's harder to go along with the extremely homophobic narrative of the organization.
I took an online class in Japanese, and one of my friends, C, was also in that class, and he is trans. So I would talk to him every day, and he would like describe all the discomfort he felt and like how he's not choosing this. Like it's not something he just wants to be a boy now. It was like I don't feel good in this body that I have. It's like I don't want this to be happening, but it's what I have to do, like for me to be sane, for me to stay alive. And I'm like, that is not, like, how could God allow someone to feel that and then punish them for wanting to alleviate their discomfort by just going by a different name, using different pronouns, dressing a different way. Like, I'm like, that's really, like, it was something like, that can't be, like, even if it was just sin, like, that's just mean. That's horrible for a God to do that to people. So that made me really start questioning, like, are these things actually, like, do you live a better life as a Christian? Like, why is God that controlling? And at that point, I'm like, I don't know even if God is real, which I was pretty sure he wasn't at that point, I don't know if I would want to serve him anyway.
And you seem like the sort of independent thinker who wears their heart on their sleeve and isn't afraid to speak out when there is something wrong. I mean, you described, fact checking the elders in the car from the way home, in the car on the way home from the meeting. Yeah. So did these feelings about the homophobic elements of the religion ever manifest in your conversations with your parents?
They did not. I would talk about if there were small things at the meeting, like factual inaccuracies that then I could talk to my parents about it, because this is objectively not true. But especially with the homophobic stuff and I could talk a little bit about the submission of women stuff, but it always wrapped around to God
this is what the Bible says. Yeah.
I could not talk about homosexuality at all. Like I've done it twice, and my parents blew up and compared it to bestiality, and why would you ever think that's okay? And yeah, so I couldn't really talk about that.
And at what point, I mean, obviously things ultimately came to a head, as you say, just a few weeks ago, but when did the friction start to get unmanageable.
bad. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
When I had just turned 16. I had like been researching science stuff, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure God doesn't exist. And I kept trying to explain to my parents that you can't prove the Bible with the Bible. And like, just the timeline of things is what really got to me. Like like human remains being found and dated well over 6,000 years, like that really bothered me. And then I tried really hard to undermine like carbon dating, and I couldn't do it. And my parents tried, and I'm like,
carbon dating works when it verifies a date in Bible archaeology that fits with the Bible, but not when it's verifying evolution. Yeah.
There would be like from things from different, like the same archaeological site, and Watchtower would be like, this thing proves that the Bible is true, but then just completely ignore the other thing. And that would bother me so much. Yeah. So that chronology, like, really undermined my faith in the Bible itself. And I tried to explain that to my parents, and they were kind of like, so you believe in evolution then? You believe we came from a monkey? You believe this all happened by chance? I'm like, no, but you don't want me to explain evolution. You don't want me to explain the probability of everything in the universe or whatever. You don't want me to explain that. You just want me to say that I'm wrong. So I was quiet about stuff for a while. And then in December of last year, well, after that, okay, I was quiet for a while. Then the pandemic happened. And going to meetings was getting really hard because I told my parents basically that I would just try to pray more and study more, and that will help with my doubts, right? So newsflash, it did not help with my doubts. They just kept.
You mean waiting on Jehovah doesn't work?
No,
wow.
And I'd pray so hard. Like my therapist, I did get a therapist after I told my parents I was suicidal or whatever. I got a therapist, and because my brain was like, you know how it says in the Bible, I forget where, but it's like, some people will see and hear, but they won't understand because their heart isn't right. So I thought my heart isn't right. So I was really suicidal because I was like, if I kill myself, then maybe I can still be with my family. Like maybe God will forgive me and then everything will be fine. But so that was like, I was really suicidal. So like I was terrified of Armageddon. So I'm like, I'm guaranteed I'm going to die. I have no faith. And yeah. So
just to interject, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important that we can talk honestly and candidly about mental health. And it's no surprise that in the situation you were in, I mean, this is an existential thing. I mean, it's not just a case of children disagreeing with their parents and all of this being hypothetical.
I wanted to agree so hard. I wanted it to be real. But I'm like, just because I want something to be real doesn't mean it's real. So finding out what was real was more important to me. I guess it became more important.
But now that I am a parent myself, I can tell you that if either of my daughters came to me and said, Dad, I'm thinking of ending it all. I mean, I freaked out recently when my daughter was expressing some kind of discomfort with her body because she's already conscious of the fact that there are these stick-thin figures on the videos that she's watching, and she's comparing them to her. And I was already mortified that could potentially lead to, eating problems and to her problems with her mental health. So if that's how I reacted to that situation, I'm trying to put myself in your parents' situation. They must have been terrified at the thought of you expressing suicidal ideations.
I think they were, but they love me very much. I know that they love me very much. And part of the reason that they were so aggressive against trying to quell my doubts is because they think that I'm going to die if I am not a witness. It's so hard to say that my parents were abusive or whatever. But the more research I do, it's pretty obvious that both of them are malignant narcissists. They're really, which isn't uncommon as witnesses.
Do you feel that perhaps behavior, I'm trying to cut them as much slack as I can, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I feel it's perhaps behavior that is programmed into them rather than who they really are.
Well, yeah, I think my dad has, he was a boxer and he came out of the truth for a while and did his own thing and then came back a couple years before he got married. But he has a lot of anger issues. So it was really hard knowing what he wanted and providing that so that me or my brothers didn't get yelled at for not doing something or threatened and stuff like that. We were never physically abused, but probably once a month we would get he would be stressed and we would do something that he didn't like and then he would blow up and yell at us for an hour or two, and we just have to stand there and listen to him say terrible things about us, like how we don't love him, how we're faking it, how we're ungrateful. I got ungrateful a lot. So that made me want to tread lightly, make sure I could be a good little Christian daughter. Don't mess up so you don't get yelled at. Don't mess up so you don't make your parents sad. That's how me and my siblings lived. We didn't want to ask for anything. We didn't want to make a fuss in any way. And
you were telling me about the pandemic hitting, and you're in this situation where you're thinking, well, I can pray this stuff away. The problem is with me. Yeah. Take us from there.
Yeah. Thanks for getting me back on track because I forgot. But yeah, so right before the pandemic, going to the meetings was awful because I was super depressed. My parents had not taken away, but I had stopped therapy for a while because of money or whatever. So I wasn't in therapy. I was super depressed. Probably once a month, I would feign illness so that I didn't have to go to the meeting. And I would just stay home and cry. And it was so hard having to go to the meeting and be sad. And you have to smile and you have to make small talk. And you have to just, especially being perceived as hyper feminine at the meetings would make me feel bad about myself as a non-binary person. So having to dress up like that, I would probably in the couple weeks before the pandemic started, I couldn't get through the meeting without having to get up and cry in the bathroom because I just felt awful the whole time.
You were being forced into being someone that you weren't.
Yes. And it was just I was at home, I was forced to be someone who I wasn't, but it wasn't as intense at the meeting. There's a very specific box that I have to shove myself into twice a week. Yeah. And my parents had kind of accepted, I guess they thought it was anxiety or something, and that's why I didn't want to go door to door. And it was anxiety, but I'm like, I don't want to convince these people of something I don't believe, and that might be harmful for them. Like, I feel terrible as a witness. I don't want to make anybody else feel like this. Yeah, so field service awful, meetings awful, and then the pandemic started. So it was kind of a blessing, because no more field service, no more going to the meeting. Going to the meeting, like there was still Zoom calls, but it was a lot. I didn't have to talk to anyone. Yeah.
But you just, I haven't been through this situation. I haven't been through a pandemic as a Jehovah's Witness. Talk me through this whole thing of doing Zoom meetings and having to dress as though you're at the meeting in your living room.
Yeah.
And I've also heard anecdotes of elders kind of checking to see that cameras are switched on and that no one's doing something else completely different. How did it work for you? For
us, in the beginning, we would dress like we were going to the meeting, like all normal. But then as the pandemic went on a little bit, we would turn off the camera sometimes and like be in normal clothes or pajamas or something. Our elders never got on to us about not having our camera on, but they would get on to people about not being appropriate enough on the camera a couple times. Like before every meeting.
Appropriate? What does that mean?
Like, I don't know. Like, I think sometimes sisters would have like lower cut tops, or I don't know. I honestly don't know. But they bring it up every meeting, like make sure that you are appropriate on camera or whatever. But our family, there's differing levels, at least on the video, of how formal people are. But like half the time my family would turn off the camera and then we'd be in normal clothes. Anywho, probably like 2 months into the pandemic, I told my parents how horrible it made me feel to have to listen to the meetings. Like, even though I wasn't at the hall, just hearing everything was really hard. And my parents couldn't understand why it was hard for me, because they're like, are you learning anything bad? Are the morals in the Bible bad? Like, even if you don't believe it's true, like, are you learning anything bad? And I have to say no, because I can't go into everything with them. But they did concede and let me not go to the meetings for like 6 months. Probably because it was on Zoom and no one would notice that it would be
there. Less shame for them, less noticeable for them. Yeah.
A couple times I got texts like, where are you? Or I miss your face or something like that. But they were infrequent. Through this. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm fascinated to know your take, because I obviously comment on the JW broadcasting episodes and all that sort of thing. And I'm fascinated to hear how this stuff is received on the other side. It seems almost impossible to consider people watching Stephen Lett doing his thing and taking it all seriously, or having to take it seriously. What was it like for you watching JW broadcasting as someone who had to basically agree with it?
Every time I watched it, it got creepier and creepier. Like, my parents are very like, oh, Stephen Lett, he's so funny. And I was just like, this man is terrifying. I'm like, I feel like he's gonna be like in my closet at night watching me while I sleep or something. Like, he's objectively terrifying. And after a while, my parents kind of gave me the choice to watch the broadcast or not. And when I could sneak out of it, I snuck out of it. But like literally a couple weeks before I left, I was watching probably the December one or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. It was just really scary and weird. And I'm like, this is cultish. This is really scary. The Caleb, it was the broadcast with the new Caleb and Sophia video. And they had the poster at the end. And my mom's like, I'm going to print out the poster and put it up in my office. I'm like, that is creepy. The poster is creepy. The animation is creepy. I don't. Ah!
This was the traumatized by a cupcake, Caleb and Sophia, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was so, like, it's just interesting that the Watchtower is aware of the turmoil that just a cupcake causes, and they still guilt. Like, I've cried multiple times as a kid, like, having to be left out of parties and stuff. Like, not even just because I'm like, oh, I want the cupcake so bad, but just, like, being seen as all your peers as a weirdo Jesus freak and having to sit out in the hallway like all the bad kids, even though you did nothing wrong. And yeah, at least me, I wasn't allowed to call them friends, but I had very few friends anyway in elementary school and middle school, because you have to look at everyone around you like they could die at any second.
Did you just say I wasn't allowed to call them friends? Yeah,
I had to call them people at school. Or
so so you're having a conversation with your mum and dad at home.
I can't call them friends.
And you inadvertently refer to a friend as a friend. What did they say?
Well, if my grandma heard me say that, she would be like bad association, like, be careful who you call your friend or whatever. My parents, I never did that in front of my parents because I knew that they would. I can't remember a time where I did it and my parents got mad at me because
you just were careful not to do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't happen very often anyway because I didn't have very many. But in high school, I think I did start doing it a little bit, and my parents, I don't know, they didn't like it. Like, I could see it in their face that they didn't like it when I did that.
It's just such a weird situation. I mean, I think to some degree it changes from place to place and family to family. I was allowed to refer to my school friends as friends, but I think it was with the understanding that they could never be true friends, if that makes sense. But for them to be policing your language to that degree where you weren't even comfortable using the word friends when talking about your school friends, that's quite interesting and disturbing.
Yeah. It's crazy now because I can go to school and, like, it's such a weird thing, but I love complimenting people now and, like, being friendly because I'm like, I could be friends with this person. And it's just great. It's such a weird thing to be happy about, but it's a lot less isolating and lonely. It's really nice.
So you were saying about during the pandemic or shortly before things came to a head, you explaining to your parents that you didn't want to sit in on the meetings anymore, and they let you skip the meetings for, I think you said, 6 months.
Yes.
What happened then?
For a couple months into it, I've been not going to meetings for like 2 or 3 months, and they said, oh, okay, so you're not going to the meetings, but do you want a Bible study or whatever? So my parents kept saying, like, oh, you chose the Bible study. You're the one who you said that you would do it. And I did say that I would do it because it was like, you're not going to the meetings. The least you can do is do a Bible study or whatever. So they guilted me into a Bible study. So I felt bad too, because I'm like, I'm a failure. I'm making them feel like a failure. They're super sad because they think I'm going to die now. So I'll do the Bible study. The Bible study was really interesting because it was framed like there was a young sister in our, we changed halls too, right before the pandemic. My family actually went to the Croatian hall.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They spoke Croatian?
I mean, they don't, because they went into it before the pandemic, like a month before. They know a couple words. We have a friend, well, it was a family friend who changed into the Croatian hall because her family is Croatian. And my family's like, oh, we should go there too. And they thought, because I like languages, I like learning languages, they're like, Moss will love this because they love languages. So
they assumed that this would kickstart your spirituality.
Yeah. It didn't. It just made it's so much more work because you have to study normally, and then you have to study the new language, and you have to look up all the words you don't know and make a comment. And I think I commented a whole one time in Croatian. And it's just, my brothers were really into it, but I was not. And part of the reason I got to slowly start skipping meetings is because I just wasn't prepared for the Croatian ones, and they're like, oh, you're not going to learn anything anyway or whatever.
But you mentioned around about this time they got you to start a Bible study.
So a sister in the Croatian congregation, she was 23. She's kind of cool, laid back witness, if I can say that. But my parents were like, she's really chill. You can just talk to her about all your questions. You don't have to hold back or worry about disappointing us or anything. Just tell her your problems. So I tried that. And it's really hard. Eventually, the sister who we went into congregation because of, I'll call her M, she also joined the Bible study. And C was more, she was more chill about anything, but M was kind of well, this is what the Bible says, so you have to do it. And that was really frustrating for me because
good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, it really was. So I would explain evolution stuff, and C would be like, that's a really interesting question, sometimes it's really hard to know, and when the new scrolls are opened, I'm sure God will let you know. And M is like, why does that matter? Why is that a problem for you? I got a lot of why does that matters, and that really bothered me because I'm like, it matters because
there's
it's
something
important.
wrong with you if you have
I was compared
issues that are important to you that aren't important to us. Yeah.
When I was talking about how the timeline of archaeology and stuff, different things, the fossils and how they don't match up with the Bible. I was compared to Eve. I'm trying to think of how she phrased it, but
when the serpent said, "Is it really so?"
Yes,
and Eve ate the fruit.
That. Yeah.
So your questioning of archaeology was akin to Eve eating the fruit. Okay, right.
And that really frustrated me. I hated going to Bible study because I knew even if I brought my evidence or whatever, they're not going to listen to it. It's not a free exchange. We talk until Moss acquiesces and accepts God or whatever. We were about to study the new book before I left, literally the lesson before.
Do you mean the interactive Bible study?
Yes, the interactive book. We were going to start.
Yeah.
And I was like, it bothered me. I hate the analogies. I hate analogies now. Because the stupid... Okay, well, Bible study, terrible. So eventually, I tell my parents, that this is in early December. I told my parents that I don't believe in God. I didn't say any of the gay stuff, but I
not believing in God is a big one, though.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't believe in God. And like the evidence in quotation marks that like the Watchtower and even the Bible is giving me are not convincing. Like, I'm trying to look for outside sources, but whenever I look for outside sources, they tend to disagree with the Bible. And Watchtower has a vested interest in proving the Bible true. So my best friend at this time, I told her about my doubts and stuff, and she wrote me a big long thing. I told her about homosexuality and stuff like that, and how I don't understand why God would have a problem with something that hurts no one, and it doesn't hurt anyone, and it makes people happy. So why God? And she sent me like a big long essay thing about just giving me Watchtower references. She told me to read the book with the dude and the monkey behind him about evolution. Is it a book or a brochure?
I think it's a book. Hang on.
That one. I only got
this is Life, How Did It Get Here, by Evolution or by Creation. And this is
so bad. So bad.
This was the one that was printed back in 1985. This is a 2006 reprint, but it's interesting that you're referring to it as the book with the dude and the monkey behind him. I think that's a gorilla, by the way. I could be wrong.
Gorilla.
Or a chimpanzee. But yeah.
It's a horrible book. There's so many, it's so bad. And I'm like, I can go through this, and like, I got like through a couple pages, and I'm like, this is so bad. I can't, I'm so sorry. No. And
absolutely littered with misquotes as well. So whenever they're quoting from a scientist, usually they're taking their words completely out of context. Yeah.
My Bible study teacher would be like, too, like, you can look at the references. And I'm like, okay, well, the references are chosen by Watchtower. And if you do look at the references, they don't say what Watchtower is saying they say. So by like researching and looking at the references, she meant go on Watchtower Library and look for things. And I'm like, you can't, it doesn't work like that. So
the study went well. But no, you said you went to your parents and said, I don't believe in God anymore. That's a big deal, that.
Yeah. So I was explaining that. Because my parents had come to me, and they were like, it's been 6 months or whatever, and you're not showing any progress. If anything, you've gotten sadder since you stopped going to the meeting. And it's like, have you stopped praying? And I'm like, no, I haven't stopped praying. I've been praying so much for God to make me understand and just believe like everybody else believes, so that I can be with my family or whatever. And I'm getting nothing. And my mom was saying how I'm bitter that God didn't take away my depression, and that's why I don't believe in him.
She said that.
She did.
Oh, good grief.
And I'm ungrateful, and that since everything around me comes from God, right? Like everything is given to her by Jehovah. So she's not going to support me with Jehovah's blessings if I don't believe in Jehovah. So it was, if you don't believe, then you'll get kicked out when you're 18, to paraphrase. So I was really scared and like betrayed, I guess, because I had read about at least teens getting kicked out by their parents for different reasons. And I'm like, but my parents love me so much. They would never do that to me. Like, but then after that conversation, I felt horrible. The house was really tense afterwards. And they also took away all my electronics. So they took away my computer, my iPad, my phone, and for a week and a half. And it was really, I got super suicidal because it was pandemic. I'm not going to school. I'm doing online school.
And we're talking now about December. So again, still literally a few weeks ago. You didn't think you were going to make it to the end of 2020?
No. But eventually I caved and said that this is like mid-December. I said that I would try hard again because I haven't been trying hard enough. That's my problem. I need to pray more. I need to go back to the meetings. So I said that I would do that. And my parents showered me with, I'm so happy that it's so happy to have you with us at the meeting. Like we can be together as a family. And and that's when going to the meetings and like I had to watch the broadcasts again, and family study was really hard because it was just like I have to zone out or something.
And how did that resolve itself? Because obviously we're getting close now to to you doing a runner.
Honestly. Yeah. So I got all my stuff back so I could talk to people again. And probably a week before I left, I heard my mom talking on the phone with M, the bad cop in the Bible study. And they were talking about how this family, the family that I'm staying with, that they weren't witnesses anymore and that they were apostates and I was supposed to not talk to them. So my mom got off the phone and they were like really surprised. My dad was really surprised because my oldest brother really liked this family, and he got really sad when he found out they were apostates and he wasn't supposed to talk to them anymore. He had like emailed them a few times asking if they wanted to do Zoom field service or something. He got really sad, but I got really excited. So I emailed Caitlin and I basically said, I hope you guys are doing really good. And I don't believe either. So believe that. And she said it was really funny because I ended the message with, if you don't want to talk to me or something, that's fine or whatever. And she's like, why would I not want to talk to you? But so we went back and forth, and it was just really amazing because I had stayed away from any, like, even though I didn't believe, I was terrified of apostate stuff. I was terrified. I was on Tumblr. I don't know if you know what Tumblr is.
Vaguely.
It's like it's a blog site where all the and there are people who make XJW posts. And one day I saw like a meme that had popped up on my feed, and I clicked the XJW tag so that it would search like the whole website. And like I looked at it for like a couple minutes, and then I literally had a panic attack. Like my heart was going so fast, and I felt so guilty and horrible. And it was just so weird because I'm like, I don't believe anymore. But I've been conditioned. I've been conditioned to like be super scared of this stuff, and there's no reason. And that happened in like October or something. And so I'm talking to Caitlin in December, and it was just like it was so amazing to talk to someone who knew how I felt. And especially Caitlin is super close to her family too. And like the pain of letting everyone down and making them feel, or at least your parents will feel like they failed, because that's like their one job, raise their kid to be a witness.
So you said that when you first communicated, or when you first heard that Caitlin and Caitlin's family were quote unquote apostate, you were glad because you saw this as an escape opportunity.
People that I respected, and like people that I'm like, these are cool, smart people, and they don't believe.
But did you see them as an escape opportunity at the time, or was it more just about having solidarity? Okay.
It was more about solidarity.
Yeah.
But by the end of the conversation, she had said that if you ever need a place to stay. So it was like, it was an inkling, but I'm like, that something like that could never happen. I would never do it. I would never leave. I couldn't cause that much of a fuss. It would cause so much pain. So I'd never do it. But eventually we secret planned to meet up at a park for a socially distanced walk. And it was, I think I cried multiple times. Plus I can't drive or anything. So I had to walk there. It was like, it wasn't a long walk, but it was like 20 minutes. And it's a small-ish town, especially the downtown area. I see people I know a lot. So I had to like weave behind buildings and stuff so that I wasn't like on the main road or whatever. So it was very scary. But then I got there. That
must have been a fascinating spectacle of you having this covert meeting,
wearing my most
Caitlin,
clothing,
doing it socially distanced, weaving around buildings.
Oh, that's not the walk. You do the walk like that. The walk was at a park, but to get to the park.
Oh, okay. I'm imagining you kind of communicating like several blocks away through hand gestures or something.
No.
Okay.
No, the walk was at a park, and it was like a very wooded area, so it was fine.
Okay.
But it was great. And they were like telling me all this adult, like this is how to get healthcare. This is how to get a credit card, not a credit card, like set up a bank account, like stuff like that. Like if I left, like this is the things you would need to do.
We're not telling you should leave, but if you did want to leave, this is how you do it.
These are adults that I can talk about, like living things, like how to do things in real life. So if I started asking my parents, that would be very, very suspicious. My parents, I kind of skipped over this, but I love learning. I really wanted to go to college, and I felt super horrible my whole childhood for wanting to go to college because I wanted to keep learning. And my mom was very, don't live in a dorm because you will do all the sex drugs and be a bad...
What's a sex drug? I want to have one of those. Wow.
No, it's just like you'll do all the debauchery.
Yeah.
Because you can't control yourself. I was told that I was too like sheltered or sweet or whatever. I would get taken advantage of. I'm not street smart enough. It was very... I was infantilized a lot at home. So I was very scared of leaving. I was very codependent. Even my therapist said that. So I'm signing up for some college things, and my mom's opinion was, you can go to college, but you have to live at home. Yeah. So I was asking Caitlin about like living not at home stuff. And Caitlin and Jordan were there and their 2 kids. What is happening? So I went on the walk. I feel super like I can be myself. Like at home, you don't even realize that you're putting up an act until like you feel like you don't have to anymore. And it was just so amazing. So I'm like, I can be myself. I don't have to hide anything because it's not terrible. And it's not, I'm not a bad person. Because at home, you're just like censoring every part of yourself. It was really great. And I cried multiple times. And they just reaffirmed that, you know, we have a room. If you want to live with us, you can, or whatever. And it was really nice. So I went home, and I was home for like 3 days, and then it was my birthday. And I left on my birthday.
Wow. So you saw your birthday as being the point at which, if you didn't leave, you would get kicked out.
I knew that if I kept up the act, I wouldn't get kicked out.
Right.
But you
couldn't keep up the act.
Today is the day I can choose. Because I'm now legally responsible for myself. Before, I couldn't make a decision because the government would be like, you have to live with your parents. But I'm like, today I can choose. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to live if I stay here.
Right. This is fascinating. So what I need now is...
Yes.
We're talking now about an escape story. And I want to know what happened on those 3 days, how you lined everything up, and what it was like closing the door on your house, or walking away from your house with them still not knowing exactly what was going on. Talk me through all
it was horrible. It was horrible. I felt like conniving, and I felt like I was validating everything they thought about me. Like I was ingrateful. I just wanted to go and sin, and I'm weak, and I don't love them. I don't love my brothers for leaving. It was very spur of the moment. So like I was thinking about it. I'm like, I could do it or whatever. And then literally like the morning that I woke up and I was 18, I got my birth certificate. I got my social security card. My driver's license, like papers about me. I got all my backpacks and tote bags, and I filled them with clothes and just basic stuff. I took all my journals and my sketchbooks, just anything that can't be replaced that I would be sad if I lost. And
were you nervous when you were doing it in case they saw you packing your things and asked you what was going on?
No, because my dad works outside the house, and then my mom she works from home, but she's on calls all day. She never comes in my room. So, well, she does sometimes, but I knew today she would be in a bunch of conference calls and stuff.
So you weren't nervous about being discovered. Were you upset? Were you sad doing this?
I felt it was weird because I felt like this when I started doing it. I felt this surge of just like, I have to leave. Like, even I just have to. That was the only thing I felt. I'm like, I have to leave now. So I texted Caitlin, like, can I leave today or whatever? And they said, yeah, we'll pick you up at the park. So,
did you leave a note for your parents?
I did. It was really short because I couldn't. And then I started writing a note to my brothers, and I couldn't write a note to them. So I actually told them before I left. There was rooms in the attic, and they have rooms in the attic. So I went up there and I asked them both to come up there, and I talked to them for like 45 minutes. I didn't tell them any of the reasons why, because I didn't want to. My mom had like told me a couple times, like, you didn't tell your brothers anything, like you didn't tell them the reasons why you don't believe or whatever, like don't you dare or whatever, like undermine their faith. So I wasn't going to do that, but I wanted to reaffirm like how much I love them, and that I'm leaving because I should stay alive. And
you told them that you were going to stay with Caitlin, so it's not.
I did tell them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, because they would have been probably concerned that for your welfare.
Yeah. I was scared because my dad has a history of violence, and I didn't want, especially because I am a dumb little child, right? So I don't know what I'm doing. So he would blame, especially Jordan, because he's the man of the house, for corrupting me and kidnapping me, basically. So I was very scared because I didn't want my dad to come to their house angry, especially because they have 2 little kids. And I don't want to bring that drama on them when they're doing something so immensely kind to me. But I'm like, my brothers were both crying, and I wanted them to know that I was with good people. So I told them, and I told them that I would like it if you didn't tell the parents, but I understand that you may feel that you have to, because God, honesty, obedience. So I'm like, I will not be mad at all if you tell, but I would prefer if you waited until they asked. So I actually threw all my bags out the window so that I didn't have to carry them out the door, because that would be kind of suspicious if I had a bunch of bags out the door. So I threw them out the window, and I put on like 5 pairs of pants and like 3 different shirts so that they didn't have to go in the bags. And I left. And I went to the park up the street, and I waited in the bushes for their car to drive by.
What, you mean like Bear Grylls? You're like, yes, a little campfire going. And
I started bawling because like I have my phone at this point, and it's turned on in case, I guess, someone attacks me in the bushes. I can call it.
Right, yeah.
And it was just, my dad called me because literally like 5 minutes after I'd gotten to the park, my dad called me and said something like, your mom says you just packed up all your bags and left. Where are you? Or whatever. And I said, I'm leaving or something. And he said, are you running away from home? Like really incredulously, like I don't know if incredulous is the right word, but like very bitingly, like sarcastic, like how would you ever do that? Like, you're so stupid. And I just said, I'm leaving or something like that. And he said, okay, or whatever, I'll give your picture to the police department so that when they find you dead in a ditch, they can identify the body. And
oh, good grief.
He said that and some other mean things, and then I just hung up on him and cried in the bushes.
What a psychopath. Who says that to their daughter?
I don't know. But I called another friend because I was freaking out. And like after my dad knew, after that phone call, I'm like, I can't go back. Like my parents will flip out. And I'll probably get kicked out anyway for thinking I could leave.
Well, he's hardly endearing himself to you, is he? He's hardly making you think, oh, this is a really safe, healthy environment for me to be in. What was I thinking? I'd better go running back.
Like, I'm like, my parents might be emotionally abusive or whatever, but they love me. But then this whole experience has just completely cemented the fact that normal people don't say that to their kids. Normal people don't say the things that my parents said. So I'm waiting in the bushes. I call a friend from school who knew about my situation. And I'm just like, I'm freaking out in the bushes and I just need to talk to someone. And he was at lunch. And he's like, I'm in the lunchroom and I have to go to class, but I will stay on the phone as long as I'm physically able to. And he was super nice. He was just like, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm like hyperventilating in the bushes with tote bags of stuff around me. And so I'm waiting, and Jordan eventually pulls up in his car and puts stuff in the trunk, and I get in the front seat, and I cry the hardest I've ever cried in my entire life. Like, I feel instant, like, horrible, like, all the guilt flooding in, and just, like, I feel like an awful person. Like, it was the most emotion I'd ever felt my entire life. And I was just he was like, "Are you sure you want to leave or whatever?" Because I'm like bawling, and I'm like, "Yes, I need to leave." And I was like, "It's done. Like, I did it. Like, I'm leaving." And I don't know how I did it, because I'm like, if I was given any other chance, I would probably not do it again. Like, now I know that it's good for me, but like, I don't know if I would be able to.
It was such a difficult, painful experience that you're not sure whether you would have had the strength to do it as again in those circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did your dad come to Jordan and Caitlin's house?
No, he did not. I got a couple emails. I got my grandma sent me some text messages that said, I've been duped by Satan. The people I'm staying with just want something from me. They'll leave me. The only people that care about me are my family. She's so sad, and that I don't really love them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left. My parents said, so I didn't know about like the 607 thing. I didn't know about the child sexual abuse because I had never gone on XJW stuff. It was just, for me, it was just factually, is the Bible right? And I had come to know. So I didn't believe. But then
which is enough, really, isn't it? That's all you really need, isn't it?
But I'm like, I never had a problem with Watchtower per se. Like, I thought it was creepy and wrong, but I'm like, whatever. But I'm like, they're really bad. Like, they lie and they hide things and they're hurtful. They're hurting people. Like, it's not just that they're wrong, it's that they're hurting people. And in my email, my parents were like, why did you leave or whatever? My mom was sending me some emails, and I sent some of those reasons. Like, I sent like 6 or 7 is wrong. Like, some of the big ones, like, you know, the major talking ones. And they basically said that those were the same reasons that Jordan had sent his father-in-law or whatever. So it's obvious that I was just looking on Reddit to confirm something that I wanted to believe, and I would take any evidence to support it, and that I don't have my own thoughts. It's not that
it's only confirmation bias when it's you. It doesn't apply to them.
No.
Yeah.
So again, I'm a little kid that doesn't know anything, and I'm being stupid and ungrateful, and I'm ruining my life, and I'm gonna die. So that was terrible. My parents during this time, it's so crazy. I don't even. My mom, I was not checking my phone because I just couldn't. And maybe like 2 days later, I checked it, and it was a series of texts from my mother. And the first text was, "I'm so sorry that you felt you had to leave. Like, you can always come back," or whatever. And that was the first text. The second text was, "If you don't return your phone and computer and iPad, then we will be calling the police for stolen property." Mind you, the iPad was a gift from my grandfather. It belongs to me.
What?
The computer was a gift from my parents because I had offered to pay for it. I'm like, I can pay for this computer. And my dad's like, no, I'll just buy it for you. And I'm like, okay, but it's mine, right? Like, it's
stolen property. So they were only giving you devices if you stayed on the understanding that you stay in their religion.
Yeah.
Well, they should have made that clear at the time, and they didn't. So those are your possessions.
But
and the police would reach the same conclusions as well.
They would? Oh.
Well, you tell me. Have you?
I mean,
have the police been called? What's happened?
In later conversations, they said that was now my inheritance, and that I shouldn't expect anything else.
Oh, right. Okay. So right. Okay. That's how they've resolved it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what's resolved. Where's I going? That happened. I think my mom sent something else, but I've blocked it out of my brain. Something mean. Yeah, my uncle came over, and that was horrible. So he pulled up. I'm terrified of anyone coming over because I've also been told by Jordan and Caitlin that Caitlin's parents they come around sometimes, and like I should be prepared for that or whatever. And
Caitlin's parents are JWs, are they?
Yes, her dad's elder, so kind of rough. But I'm like peeking out this window right here because I see the car pull up and like that's my uncle's car, and I want to see my uncle come out, and he looks really like angry, and he sees me peeking through the window, and he's like, "Come out here," or whatever. So I come out and I start talking to him, and my uncle is very jovial. He's pretty young, so like I remember him as like me being a little kid and us watching cartoons together, because he was a teenager and he would watch me and my brother when we were little, and so he was like the fun uncle. And to see him like fuming and super serious was like scary in itself because I'd never seen that before. And so he comes out and he's like, when I got the call from your mother, or not your mother, my mom had talked to my grandma, and my grandma had talked to him. And he's like, I moved heaven and earth to find this address. And like, I don't know how someone could be so incredibly stupid or something to lead like that. Your dad is about to come over here and kill someone. Your mom is just shoving it deep down.
Like a good JW.
Yes. He threatened. He said if he ever saw Jordan that he would go to jail. He said that.
Whoa. So your Jehovah's Witness father has said that if he sees Jordan, he's going to... He doesn't know what to do. And sorry?
He said that he doesn't know what he would do, and he would probably go to jail.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Well, that's a nice Christian attitude, isn't it?
Yeah. And so it's very scary.
And all of this is very recent. So
yeah, this is...
Is there no element of things kind of improving with time, or is it still like you're on tenterhooks?
Drastically in a month. Like the first week, awful, garbage, all of that was happening. Now, if a car comes up the driveway and I don't know who it is, I get a little scared. But like living day to day, and I'm going to school now, I'm so much happier. Because you don't realize how much of a toll it is, like faking all the time, until that's like you just have your base level really low existence, and then the huge weight is taking off, and like it's horrible, but then it gets so much better as your baseline, and it's great. Like, so it's up and down, but
so you struggle to imagine summoning the same strength if you had to do it all over again, but bottom line, do you have any regrets?
No. I'm so glad that I was able to do it. Like, I'm so glad that in that moment I got that feeling that pushed me out. And I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was just self-preservation.
Can you promise me that at some point you're going to get that therapy and that counseling back on track?
Yes, I'm working on it.
Because you have been through a ridiculously traumatizing experience.
Yeah.
And you need help.
I do. I'm excited for that to happen.
Wow. Well, all I can say is, and we're kind of out of time here, but all I can say is that I'm immensely impressed with the courage that you've been able to summon and the intellectual honesty, even when you were in situations where you were threatened, you were mistreated, you were made to feel as though you didn't belong, you were subjected to abusive language. For you to come through all of that and be as eloquent and coherent as you have been in this interview speaks volumes about your character. And it's a privilege to know you, and certainly a privilege to interview you. And I'm sure you will inspire many, many young people who watch this interview.
That's really nice of you to say. I don't feel like I deserve it, but I will accept it.
I don't expect you to feel like you deserve it, but that's how it is. And before we conclude, do you have any words of advice for other young people who are in the situation that you've described?
I just want to say that, like, I'm stuttering, but it does get so much better. Like, you feel like, at least for me, I felt like I had no future, especially when I was depressed. I'm like, there is no future. It's either God is going to make the world end or humans will destroy it because humans are so evil. And you get out and you realize how much of a lie that is and how people are good. And that the baseline is so much better. Like, not everyone is good, but I have hope for the first time in my life. Like, even as a witness, I have more hope for the future. And it's an amazing feeling. And
I think the thing that you really did well was you were strategic to a degree. When things were really serious, there's that scripture, cautious like serpents, innocent like doves. You told them you were going to go back to doing the meetings, even though you knew what direction this was going in, just to buy yourself a bit more time. And that was really smart of you, really wise of you. I would just, want to say to any young people watching this that it's not always going to work out exactly the same as it did with you, where you had a supportive family nearby who completely understood your situation and were a safe, welcoming, healthy environment for you to transition into immediately. It's almost inevitably going to be more complicated in other situations. But bottom line, as long as you are shrewd and plan well and take it all very seriously, you're strategic, you line everything up perfectly so that when your 18th birthday comes, you're ready to make that leap and you have you have an escape route available to you. I think that the long-term benefits to mental health make that advisable if you're able to do that. And I think you are a shining example of doing it that way, of just being careful and being strategic and lining up an escape route as soon as it became available. So well done.
You have to be safe.
You
Set
do.
it up so that you can be safe.
The only bit that concerned me was when you were in those bushes, but
I know. I did not.
Fortunately, Jordan turned up eventually. But that's it. And probably one final question. Almost inevitably, at some point, I mean, I'm talking either days, weeks, months, years, or even decades, your family might watch this interview.
Yeah.
What would you want to say to them?
I want to say that I left because I didn't believe. No. I didn't want to live a lie, I guess. It was the hardest thing that I ever had to do, to leave my parents and my brothers, and that I love you guys so much, and it hurt me every day to lie to you, and that's part of the reason I had to leave. I wanted you to know who I really was. I felt that you were owed that. I don't know, but I'm happier than I would have ever been as a witness. So if that is anything, I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your story. Moss, you are an inspiration. And I am filled with admiration for your courage and bravery. So thank you for sharing your experience.
I hope it helps someone.
So viewers, that's all we have time for. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, Thank you for watching.